Welcome to the NWI.com Political Roundtable for Friday, March 14th. I'm Robert Blaszkiewicz, Assistant Managing Editor of The Times. Join with me, Doug Ross, Editorial Page Editor of The Times. And we've got a lot to talk about because the legislative session, the 2014 legislative session just ended late last night. A flurry of activity, most notably for the region was Senate Bill 367. Talk about that, Doug, and what it does, it could do for the region if Governor Pence signs it.
Right, that was the bill that would set aside $4 million a year for the South Shore. And here's how this works. This doesn't build the South Shore, but it amasses money so that it, once the train is built, then there would be enough money amassed in that fund to operate it for the first 5 years of its operation. That's, it's not good enough to just build it.
Right.
Federal government wants to make sure you can operate it as well. So, that gets us to that point. So that's huge. We still have to get to where the communities in Lake County have to cough up the money so that you can pay off the bonds for construction. That's huge too. But this is a very, very crucial step to accomplish this.
Yeah, and there was some local resistance to this bill, most notably from Mayor McDermott of Hammond, mainly because they did not want to lose that local control over those savings. By savings by closing the tax loophole, they thought that should go to the communities, not to the RDA.
Right, but keeping in mind this is casino money that was going in to fund those tax breaks. So the state can do whatever it wants with the casino money, and often does.
Right. Well, today we heard from Republican House and Senate leaders, House Speaker Brian Bosma and Senate Leader Long, and of course Governor Mike Pence, Republican, talking about the accomplishments of this Senate. And the one thing they trumpeted most of all was the business tax cut deal that will not immediately, but down the road, cut taxes for businesses and what they say will create jobs.
Right. So you have a corporate income tax cut from, and I wrote it down, printed it out actually, 6.5%. Next year it goes to 4.9% by 2021. So that helps. And then there's also the business personal property tax. There's a couple of ways counties can have the option to eliminate that. Why they would do that, I have no idea, especially up here where, it's a huge chunk of change. They really rely on that money. And we're talking primarily manufacturing equipment and things like that, especially up here. And then localities could abate business taxes, these taxes, for 20 years instead of 10. So, there's a longer event horizon for that. So, that could be a huge selling point for new businesses.
Well, it seems like what happened with this business tax cut deal is that Pence did not get what he wanted, what he put forward.
Right.
And that was because local municipalities and local governments, they screamed bloody murder over what they were seeing as the revenue that they would lose and the cuts that they would have to make in local government. And there was no real answer to how to replace those revenues given. What they did was just down the road said, we're going to cut these taxes down the road, but still there doesn't seem to be a plan in place yet for where the revenues will come from to replace those lost business taxes.
Absolutely. I mean, any county that can say we're not going to have this is a county that doesn't have much to start with. I mean, even the Republican, the very, very deep Republican counties, they just really moaned about this. They really were upset about this because they rely on that money.
Right.
And so, to say that, we're going to not rely on the additional money coming in, okay, that's a fair thing. With the 20-year abatement, for example, that's a 20-year abatement on what's the life of the equipment.
Yeah.
Too.
And the pain of these tax cuts really won't be felt before the 2016 election when, you presume Mike Pence is going to run for re-election unless he decides to run for president.
Exactly. And all signs look toward governor for this one.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah. The other kind of issue that loomed large over this year's session was, of course, gay marriage. It took up a number of weeks of debate in both the House and the Senate, and then basically ended up being kind of nothing because what they voted on removed a sentence from the original bill, so it basically reset the clock on that bill, and then caused them to it won't go to a referendum this year. And now it's looking more and more likely that it may never get to a referendum, because this issue is probably going to be settled in the courts.
Well, and here's why it wasn't, you got to remember why it wasn't going to the referendum was that the wording that was passed, previous and, was up for approval again this year would have forbid civil unions. And, some of the people who don't like gay marriage say, well, let's give them the civil union option, so at least we can't call it marriage, and, makes it more of a way to, like Illinois created civil unions, at least it wouldn't forbid that by state constitution.
Right,
So-
right, and that leads us into what we're seeing now, which we've seen between just this week, late last week and this week, we've
Right.
seen, I believe it now, the count's up to 5 lawsuits filed challenging Indiana's ban on gay marriage, and one of the lawsuits involves 2 local couples,
Right.
one from Chesterton and one from Munster, and longtime couples who are saying basically that their rights they're not being treated as equals, their rights are being infringed upon. And so we've seen in state after state, these laws have been overturned. So if that's any indication, it doesn't look like the Indiana ban will be able to survive these legal challenges.
Right, and to give you an idea of what this means, one of the lawsuits that was announced today, as I recall, dealt with a woman who, she was part of a couple, went to the funeral home, and the funeral home would not authorize her to be able to make any funeral arrangements, because in Indiana she wasn't legally married, so she wasn't legally the next of kin. That's what's at issue. She inherited the house, paid $300,000 inheritance tax that, had it been a male-female couple, there would have been no tax there. So, this is a pretty big civil rights issue for gay and lesbian couples.
Yeah, and the Munster couple actually both work as first responders in Illinois, so they brought up the issue that they go to work, they're married, they come home to Indiana, they're not married. So you do have this situation that just it seems like it really is it's just a legal mess right now.
It is. It's just roiling Indiana. I can tell you, there are many people, and not just in the gay and lesbian community. There are many people who are really discussing, what's fair, and times are changing. How do we deal with this? It's.
And the other interesting thing here is that Attorney General Greg Zeller released a statement yesterday that was not what you would think would be like a full-throated response defending Indiana's law. It was more of as an Attorney General, I'm legally obligated to defend this law. So I think you kind of sense that things are shifting here, and that the resistance is not going to be really forceful.
Well, and public opinion is shifting. So if he had taken the position of, the law is great, we need to uphold it at all costs, and so forth, had he been a real zealot about it, he would have irritated a whole lot of potential voters for him. So, politically, he's got to really cover himself with this.
Yep.
So it's a really it's a mess.
Yeah.
It just is.
Well, we'll definitely be keeping an eye on it and watching where these lawsuits go, and of course we'll be bringing you that news and reaction to it as it comes along. So that's all the time we have for this week. Thank you for watching. We'll be back next week with another Political Roundtable.